Heat check. Basketball, basketball, college. Basketball, basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa.
Welcome back to the Heat Check Hangout, your number one source for all things basketball college. I am your host, Riley Davis, joined today by my co-host, Connor Hope. How you doing, Connor?
Doing fantastic. Just living life. 1-year-olds are exhausting, Riley, so you have that to look forward to in a year. But no, doing great. Excited for the season. We've got conference preseason polls and all conference teams being released. The AP poll just came out at the time of this recording. It came out on Monday. We're recording this on Thursday, so there's a lot more to talk about. 2 weeks to the season, so it's gonna come upon us pretty quick.
Yeah. It's funny. I know, again, not to take away from the college basketball dialogue, but you mentioning 1-year-olds. I kind of feel like between me, you, and Brian all having kids now, like we might have to start incorporating a parent corner type of segment to the show. Because before we started recording, Connor told me that his 1-year-old dropped a 25-pound weight on his foot today. So he's persevering through that. We're getting through some adversity, but like Connor said, AP poll dropped this week. Evan Miyakawa's rankings dropped last week. Kim Pom dropped last week as well. The season is swiftly approaching upon us. And personally, I've had fun perusing the AP poll, and actually, I've mostly agreed with it, which is kind of surprising. I love making fun of the AP poll. And we'll touch on obviously two of the teams in the top 5. With Michigan State and Purdue as we get into our Big Ten preview today. But yeah, of course, got to give a shout out to our guy, Evan, our favorite statistician, dropping his rankings as well. But yeah, it's starting to set in. We're very close to the start of another season. And I think both of us, Connor, our two teams, have some questions to answer between Gonzaga and UNC. I'm trying not to get my hopes up, but it's just like every year as it gets closer, I'm looking forward more and more to seeing Carolina play, as I'm sure you feel with the Zags. But anyway, we'll cut away from our teams today to go to a league that we enjoy watching, we enjoy following. And I think with some of our company, I think specifically the Sleepers guys, Greg and Carter, it's a league that we tend to follow closely and have a lot of dialogues about, and it's the Big Ten, as I said at the beginning. So looking at the Big Ten, it's a league that has sort of been maligned by its tournament play recently and has kind of been defined by big men too. But this year, I think, well, for one, it has, like we mentioned, 2 top 5 teams. And one of the bigger takeaways that I've had is there doesn't seem to be this just a host of dominant centers. Like Trace Jackson Davis is gone. Hunter Dickinson has moved on. Think about EJ Liddell a couple years ago, or Ethan Happ even before that. And Luka Garza, of course, all those names that we've grown accustomed to seeing over the past half decade or so that's made it more Big Ten, or a big man centric league. It's not really the case this year, Connor. Is there anything you have noticed about that, or anything that sticks out to you with even maybe what you're looking forward to as far as some stylistic shifts?
Yeah, I mean, I think who are the teams with that are going to have true big men on the roster? You've got Purdue, Indiana has Kyle Ware. Outside of that, are we talking Dawson Garcia? I mean, I think Northwestern has a 7-footer, but Dawson Garcia, Coleman Hawkins might be the closest thing you get to a true big man. Penn State, Wahab is a 6'11" guy.
Oh yeah, I forgot about Wahab being there. I mean, you have Terrace Reed at Michigan. Oh yeah, but even with some of those guys, like with Khalil Ware, I think of him as more a rim runner, shot blocking type big who has some post moves in his bag. And Cliff Amorie, I think that's how you say it. I don't know if it's Amarui or Amorie, but Cliff, he's another one of those rim running bigs who sort of makes his hay on hustle plays and dunks and everything. And it's not the low post threats of TJD or even Dickinson and his bag in the post, or Edey's kind of the last man standing there. And I would say that's one of the storylines I'm most looking forward to, is just seeing a stylistic shift with how Michigan State's going to play. They don't have a dominant 5-man. I'm very high on that team. That's going to be more perimeter oriented. You mentioned Coleman Hawkins at Illinois, and he's been in that mold for really the past 2 years as sort of a more modern big man who can facilitate, make threes when he needs to. And then even a team like Michigan, where, they've been characterized by Hunter Dickinson for the past 3 years. He's moved on, and Terrace Reed is sort of the next up there, but that's going to be far from the focal point of that team. So a lot of teams are having identity makeovers, but aside from the shift away from big men, is there anything that sticks out to you as far as just the greater narrative for the conference or greater storylines for the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's weird to say, but I think Purdue and Michigan State, at least recently, in recent memory of the Big Ten, are built most similarly to past national champions in terms of, like, Michigan State at worst right now is like a preseason top 5 backcourt in the country. Purdue, their backcourt might not be as strong, but again, we saw flashes from those 2 freshman guards. They're going to be sophomores. Even if one makes a sophomore leap and the other one just kind of is an incremental improvement from his freshman year, like, that still gives Edey a lot more to work with from the perimeter than they had. And when you watched that game that they lost in the tournament, this March, it was it looked like almost like a lack of confidence from their perimeter players.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of players would get, I mean, and a lot of it was Mason Gillis pulling what looked like a Draymond, getting wide open looks on the perimeter and passing it, but they were almost unwilling to shoot the 3 in that game, even when they had decent looks. And so, they were able to double Edey down in the post. And I think
Mm-hmm.
this year, hopefully, is not the same. Like, I think you've got 2 guards who have been there. They've lost in the tournament, but they know what it takes to win in the postseason.
Right.
So I like the makeup of those 2 teams. I have both of them in my Final Four. History is not on their side.
Yeah.
Right? Recent history, and hopefully we don't get into a situation where the officiating in the Big Ten becomes that storyline of they're still making it so that they're still promoting this, like, smash mouth, get the ball to the post
Mm-hmm.
and bang down low type of basketball that we've seen over the last 2 decades or plus. But I do think that once we get to March, if those 2 teams have any good seeding, which I think they will, I think they're both on the top 2 seed lines, then we're going to be looking at those 2 teams as a lot of people might be picking against them because of the Big Ten. But show me, I mean, Purdue maybe, but show me 10 teams that you feel better about their backcourt in March than Michigan State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
probably not there.
That's exactly where I'm at as far as I would say, like, for me, the biggest storylines for this league. For one, mentioned the kind of the death of the Big Ten Center. Maybe that's a little dramatic, but close to that. Second one is like legit national title contenders, and two of them, Michigan State, Purdue. I'm right on board with you there. I love the makeups of both of those teams. And, you mentioned that Purdue backcourt, and we can get into them a little bit more when we talk about our rankings. But yeah, kind of at the start of, like, way too early poll season, I think I swung too far in the opposite direction, where it's like I couldn't shake those Fairleigh Dickinson images out of my mind, and I'm like, no, Lawyer and Braden Smith, they don't have what it takes. Purdue will be top 10, but they're not going to get to this level again. But I've kind of swung, like, the opposite direction, just the more that I've even gone back watching highlights of both those freshman guards, and even seeing the way that Braden Smith in particular performed on their foreign tour. Like, I think he is about to have a huge year. I think he's better than Fletcher Lawyer. So that's someone I'm really high on. And the last storyline that I would hit on that I think will transition us pretty smoothly into our rankings would be, I think the top 5 of this league is really, really good. I know, again, talking to our guys over at Sleepers, Greg has been saying that it's the Schmedium 10 yet again, that it's a pretty weak league. And I would say there's a jumbled middle that we'll get to as we look to this, and the bottom 2, like, I have Penn State and Nebraska Penn State and Minnesota at the bottom, which we'll get to. And I think Minnesota is going to be really bad again, but even Penn State, I think Mike Rhodes is someone who can elevate the floor of that program, and they have some interesting pieces. So yeah, I would say the top five teams, should be really good, should be tournament locks, sort of a jumbled middle where you could see 2, 3, maybe 4 teams emerge from that and get into the big dance. And then even the bottom isn't terrible.
Yeah, we were talking about this. Was it with you or was it with Brian where I was discussing the Cal as it relates to the ACC? I think it was with
I think it was with
you.
us, yeah, talking about
Yeah,
Cal. On the
where
ACC
where they
preview.
would finish.
Right.
And we had them pretty high, right? We had them like
Mhm.
6th or 7th in the ACC if Cal was in the ACC. I agree with you. I think they'd be 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th in the Big Ten. And I don't necessarily view anyone outside the top 2 as like their second weekend locks. They're going to make some noise in March, right? I think the Big Ten probably gets 3 teams in the second weekend at a minimum. I just don't know who that third team is that I would pick. But like if we're using Cal as a benchmark for this is a mediocre basketball team, who's above them, who's below them, like more of the Big Ten is above mediocre than is below mediocre. So
we should
as
come up
far
with
as it relates to high major teams.
We need to come up with a name for this, like this measuring stick of mediocrity with Cal, like the Cal,
Well, we need to pick a team that's always mediocre. What team is always mediocre?
Seton Hall. It's like the Seton Hall crockpot dinner. You know, you don't know what to eat, so maybe you find like a quick crockpot recipe that's gonna be fine, nothing spectacular. If you got a suggestion for this name, drop it in the comments. But yes, I like this of having this benchmark of mediocrity. But yeah, let's go ahead and start with the top. Let's talk about the 2 teams that should not be mediocre, should be way better than mediocre if unless something horrible goes wrong, and that's Michigan State and Purdue. Connor, I'm curious to know how you have those 2 teams ranked, and even beyond that, like how much separation do you have between Michigan State and Purdue?
None. I have Purdue. Well, I have Purdue number 3 in the country in my top 25 preseason. I think I have Michigan State number 4, but they might be number 5 for me. Again, not much of a difference between those 2. I think Purdue is the better season long pick. In terms of winning that conference, because I do think their floor is probably higher. They have the best player in the country. Biggest mismatch in that conference is Zach Edey over basically any other center in that conference.
Right.
Where you they have solid players everywhere else, and I don't necessarily think for as good as Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard are, I don't think the mismatch between them and some of the other guards in the conference is quite as large as Edey over the other centers. I have Purdue winning the regular season of the Big Ten. I believe you and I are on the same page, though. I think both of us have Michigan State winning the national championship. So,
yep.
I'd take Tyson Walker and AJ Hoggard in a single elimination tournament over basically any other team in the country. I do think Michigan State has the best backcourt in the country. My only concern season long is if it gets to be a bang it down low type of Big Ten, how well do they hold up against some of these other teams? I think Purdue has the advantage there, but once you get into the tournament where it becomes a guard show, give me Michigan State.
Yeah. I'm for the most part with you on that. I still have Michigan State ranked 1 spot higher. As of right now, I'd have Duke 1, Michigan State 2, Purdue 3 for the national picture. And I see, like, there have been no shortage of people telling me it's crazy to pick Michigan State over Purdue, even if they say that the gap between the 2 is small. I know what the computers say. I know what the advanced metrics say. I know KenPom has Purdue 1. I think Evan has Purdue number 1. I know Michigan State's lost double-digit games the last couple of seasons. And to be honest, sometimes I can't necessarily justify my pick of Michigan State beyond the vibes. Like I think there are good vibes with this team combined with like a really excellent roster. Like you said, Tyson Walker, AJ Hogard, one of the best top 3, 4, 5 backcourts in the country. I love that they also have Jeremy Fears who can come off the bench. Like if either of those guys gets banged up throughout the course of the season, I don't think there's going to be a ton of drop off when Fears enters the game. He is just that quintessential Tom Izzo type of guard, like a Cassius Winston type. Not saying that's going to for sure be his outcome or anything, but the infrastructure is there. Like he has the talent to become that type of player in time. Again, not saying that's for sure going to happen, but the pedigree's there, the skill set is there. And that would even, it's part of that freshman class why I am so high on Michigan State. Like I know Xavier Booker has sort of seen his ranking tumble over the past year, but he's still a top 10 guy going into a front court that needs some help at either the 4 or the 5 that he can slot right in there. And you have Cohen Carr, who's dunking from the free throw line at the Michigan State scrimmage, and not just dunking, throwing down like a double clutch tomahawk dunk. Like I know there are concerns about Carr and his inability to hit free throws or his inability to shoot, but guys that explosive, like get on the floor. I mean, that is literally Zion Williamson type athleticism. You find a role for that guy and trust that he can figure out something. It's not like we've seen guys who are not necessarily functionally athletic who can just jump really high or throw down some crazy dunks. But there's a difference between like an East Bay dunk and a double clutch tomahawk from the free throw line. I guess that's all I can say there. So yeah, I really like
the you look at the role players too, like Jaden Akins. I mean, he can shoot the hell out of the ball if you need him to. You mentioned it, like Xavier Booker, Cohen Carr. Like if you need them to come in offensively to spell like a Malik Hall or Amadi Sissoko, like that is a good problem to have, where you have 2 really good freshmen that you might need to come in for your graduate student and senior. Like they have maybe not as talented players that have a lot of experience, and then they have really talented players coming in to spell them. And if Jackson Kohler is your 10th man, like I'm not a huge Kohler fan, but having him as like that deep in your rotation, I think to me is a good sign.
And I would say, I think Tom Izzo is still the best coach in this league. Like I'd give Izzo the edge over Painter. Painter's a great coach. I know March Madness runs can be fluky sometimes, but Izzo's been there and done it before. And I think even with the flukiness of March Madness, having guards like Tyson Walker, who's performed on the biggest stage, like that matters. So that all factors into why I'm picking Michigan State 1. But so beyond those top 2, Connor, who's next? Who do you have in that 3, 4, 5 range?
Do I have to pick?
I guess maybe this is where we're at odds, because I think my number 3 team is the top 25 team. My number 4 team is a French top 25 team.
3 for me is probably Illinois. I think if they can figure out their questions at the 1, I like the coaching that Underwood brings. I think it's a pretty solid roster, right? You've got your top 6 on that roster is really solid. It's just a question of like, can you get Quincy Guerrier to be what he was or what he was expected to be when he was going to Oregon, right? And can TJ Shannon run the point? Like that's the biggest question, right? It's TJ Shannon at the point, to me, is the greatest source of unease when it comes to Illinois for me. But we've seen Illinois win with subpar point guard play. So
yeah, they did it last year.
I would probably have them, and I know you're probably going to have, I'm going to guess right now you have Indiana 3.
No.
Or Maryland. You have Maryland 3?
I have Maryland 3. I love the Terps this year.
I would probably go Illinois, Maryland, Indiana.
Wow, that's different than my next 3. Or we have one different, yeah. To your point about Illinois, I feel like Illinois fans have about had it with the TJ Shannon at point guard experience. If you look at any of their tweets, it's like they definitely don't want to see that. Ty Rodgers has generated a bunch of buzz this year as like a 6'6" point wing type who's going to play the 1 full time. But we're in those circles with people who are plugged in, and from a national perspective, people who are more plugged in, like with assistant coaches and everything, to where it seems like the rumblings, and it's not necessarily even breaking news. It was evident with who Illinois pursued through the portal. It was like, yeah, they're in on Ty Rodgers, but at the same time, they're still constantly looking for point guards. So it's like, do they want to try this experience? Were they hoping for some insurance? Like, I'm curious what the staff how the staff used Ty Rodgers as a point guard if it's not going to be Shannon, because if you look at Rodgers' highlights from last year, I think there are some real flashes there. Like, there are times where he looked dynamic with the ball in his hands, where he'd beat his man off the bounce, draw some attention and kick out to the corner or something, or find an open man for a nice little pocket pass or something, to where he has that facilitation type skills. But yeah, I want to say what did he average? Like 2 points a game last year? Like, having that as a penciled in, like, your number one option. And I guess the backup choice would be Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, who, again, highlights make DGL look awesome. I love that he has a cool name. Like, and I know Illinois was posting those highlights from him overseas, throwing down crazy dunks and stuff, to where he's got insane athleticism. And I think at one time was either a high 4-star, maybe even a 5-star, like, throughout his recruiting process. So, but yeah, I don't know if, like, the Ty Rodgers, TJ Shannon, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn triumvirate would give me, like, the most confidence if I was an Illinois fan. Is like, it's going to be one of those three heading into the season. That's honestly why I have them 5th. But I don't think you can overstate the importance of having someone like Shannon, who scored 18 a game last year, someone like Hawkins, who has been a, like, all Big Ten caliber forward, and even someone like Dane Danger coming off the bench, who just has, like, we talked about depth at the Big Ten center. He has that skill set. He just doesn't get the playing time. Like, he's a bucket in the low post. And I think he's kind of has a decent handle for a big too. So, good pieces. Love Underwood's track record, but guard questions have me sliding Illinois down to 5. But like I tease, my number 3 team is Maryland. What are your thoughts on the Terps, Connor? Where'd you say you had them ranked?
I had them ranked 4th behind Illinois. For me, it's the depth. Like, Maryland's projected starting 5 is going to probably be really good. If you believe in a guy like Batchelor or Geronimo stepping into that 3 spot for them, because I think Dante Scott, Julian Reese, really good front court. Jameer Young, a really good guard. I know Harris Smith has a lot of pedigree coming out of high school. Mm-hmm. It's that 3 spot for me. That's the question. But, like, their top 6, right, looks really good. I'm not the biggest fan of Chance Stevens as, like, a 7th or 8th option on that team. So I think some of their other freshmen might have to step up, or like a Jahari Long coming in to play significant minutes, which is a big question mark, considering he hasn't really gotten to that point. Didn't get to that point last year. And that's why I have them 4th behind Illinois, because we've seen Illinois with similar roster makeups do it and get into the top 3 to 5 of the Big Ten. Maryland, to me, it's just a bigger question mark. I do again, coaching is going to help Maryland a ton, right? And you could argue they have the 3rd best coach in the conference.
Yeah.
Which is why I think which is honestly why I put them into the top 4 over teams like Indiana and Ohio State. And actually those are the only 2, because Wisconsin is purely a coaching pick for where I have them.
Coaching in a good way or a bad way? I think you could go either way with guard, to be honest.
Coaching I've learned not to doubt Wisconsin finishing top half of the Big Ten, because no matter who they have on their roster, they're always there.
Honestly, Wisconsin could be our mediocrity benchmark, like under Greg
Wisconsin
Yard.
Is probably the mediocrity benchmark.
The Wisconsin crockpot dinner of benchmarks. Have fun with your 8 or 9 seed.
But yeah, I don't mind the Maryland 3 pick, because again, like, for me, that Illinois through, like, Ohio State, Wisconsin is so interchangeable. I don't have any other teams in my top 25. They're all in that, like, 25 through 35, 40 range, which I think is really close this year. So Maryland finishing 3rd in the Big Ten I have them 4th, so it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah. I think you make a great point about the depth. Like, the depth definitely gets a little bit shaky. I just think their top 5 is so good that it's like, they have room for error. And I mean, I would kind of expect Jamie Kaiser to be the one who slots in at the 3. I know he was really impressive on the Adidas circuit. Like, we have friends who were there who scouted him in person, and like everybody I ever talked to about Jamie Kaiser was always blown away from seeing him in person. Really good shooter. And I think he's another guy who shined on Maryland's in their foreign exhibition games. You hit on Deshaun Harris-Smith. He's sort of becoming like the trendy pick for freshman of the year in this league. And I love his game. I love that he comes from Team Takeover and the AAU program on the EYBL circuit that has just churned out pros and really good college players. Armando Bacot played there. Dickinson played there. Justin Moore played there. Like, if you look at guys who have come from Team Takeover, it's just loaded. And even watching him at Peach Jam 2 years ago, like, he plays so hard. I think he's 6'4", 6'5", but he was grabbing double-digit rebounds routinely in these Peach Jam games against the best competition. I think having a guy like that who can pressure the rim, draw fouls, and he can make plays for others, that's going to be a really fun backcourt with him and Jameer Young. Jameer Young is also a killer. But
who else on this roster, other than Chance Stevens, because I'm pretty sure Chance Stevens shot like 150 threes, and like two pointers for LMU, but who other than Chance Stevens shoots the ball for this team? Because that's a
great question. Jamie Kaiser? It's Jamie Kaiser, Chance Stevens, and that's it. And theoretically, okay, Dante Scott. Although Jameer Young, I mean, he's not a shooter by any stretch, but he's still like just got a scorer's mentality and has made clutch shots throughout his career. Like, so
yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, it's can teams kind of pack it in and dare them to shoot when they don't have Chance Stevens on the floor.
Yeah.
I said I'm not a huge fan of Chance Stevens' game, but he shot threes, and he shot threes at a really high clip for LMU, and that's basically all he did.
Yeah,
for the Lions. So.
I was gonna ask your scouting report, because I know, like, again, I wasn't nearly as dialed into the WCC as you, but I see 17 point per game scorer, 37% from three,
per game.
Oh, 17 minutes per game. Yeah, looking at the wrong.
He was a 6 point per game scorer. And I just looked it up. He shot 131 threes last year, attempted 131 of them, made them at a 37% clip. He attempted 14 two-pointers.
Jeez. That's got to be the life right there, man. Hopefully he's eating crab cakes and getting a good NIL check and just pulling up anytime he's on the court. Like that.
And I've been consistent, and you know this. I think the one skill set that translates is 3-point shooting, or jump shooting in general, but 3-point shooting specifically. So he could be really good off the bench, but again, is he the only one?
Right. Well, let's move on to the next couple teams that I think we'd have ranked similarly, which would be Ohio State and Indiana. And I have Ohio State as that 4th team. So yeah, my top 5 that I think will be really good should make the tournament with fairly easily without many questions would be Michigan State, Purdue, Maryland, Ohio State, and Illinois. Then I think I have Indiana. I have Indiana 7th, sandwiched in between following Illinois and Wisconsin. Got Wisconsin 6th. Don't feel great about it, but yeah, it sounded like you were relatively high on the Hoosiers. So what? Maybe I shouldn't say relatively high. Higher than me on the Hoosiers.
Yeah, I have them 7th. Look, I think with Indiana, I do think that even though they don't have Trace Jackson Davis, they can probably, if Kel'el Ware wakes up, because his biggest issue in high school at Oregon was that there were times last year where it didn't seem like he put in 110% effort.
Yeah.
Like there were times where it seemed like he was just out there playing basketball and taking up a spot. But you mentioned his skill set, right? If Woodson can unlock something, which that's my biggest issue with Indiana is I'm not a huge Woodson fan. I never was when he was hired. I still am not. When they had Trace Jackson Davis and Xavier Johnson both healthy, Indiana was a top 5 pick and roll offense in the country. They would kill you on the pick and roll. If they can unlock that with Kel'el Ware, I think they're still top 10, top 15. Like it's if they can unlock his you can't deny his talent level and his ceiling. If they can unlock,
for sure.
if they can unlock that, him as a rim runner, him getting to the rim off of a pick. Xavier Johnson is about as good as anybody as the pick and roll ball handler. Like that to me is where they hit their ceiling. They could finish third. I have them fifth because I don't know if they quite get there. They have similar depth concerns. We'll see where people kind of slot in, but Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway can stay healthy. That's like a solid offensive backcourt. And then, I like Renew. I like Anthony Walker's skill set. It's just a matter of putting it all together. So I actually felt low putting Indiana fifth. But I do think that their range of possibilities is super wide.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, there is a world where like Xavier Johnson gets hurt or he just is sort of erratic like he's been for the majority of his career, and they are toward the bottom of the league, or the spacing concerns with like Mackenzie Mbaka, Malik Renew, and Khalil Ware, where you sort of have three forwards trying to make it work. I'm with you on Ware's ceiling, and I don't know. I'm kind of in on Woodson's ability to unlock that. I think Woodson helping Trace really transform his game last year gives him a lot of credit, because TJD before last season was always going to be a double-double machine, but he unlocked him as a passer where, TJD led them in assist rate, and it wasn't cheap assists. Like he was making really tough passes, like out of double teams, like cross court, finding open shooters. It was really like honestly beautiful basketball to watch. So that would give me hope as an Indiana fan. Personally, I've like loved Malik Renew's game since he was been at Montverde. And a rule of thumb is I usually just buy Montverde products anyway. So I think Renew showed some like passing flashes last year. I wouldn't necessarily expect him to I'm not expecting him to be at a TJD level passer, at least right now. Maybe at some point in his career he could get there, but he has some of that skill set. Mbako, I know he's a streaky shooter, kind of has a questionable shot selection, has been the knock on him. Still a top 10 recruit, in a weaker recruiting class, but still a top 10 recruit. Is you like being able to have that guy on the team as a ceiling raiser. My concerns are mainly like they kind of have too many big men. Like they have that guy coming in from Ball State, Peyton Sparks. Like most of their depth are going to be front court pieces, and I don't really know what they're going to be able to get out of their guards. Like Xavier Johnson struggled to stay healthy, and kind of like I said, has been erratic for a lot of his career. Trey Galloway's a role player. I have at least from the outside looking in, on the surface, you mentioned Anthony Walker too, another 6'9" guy in the front court. I kind of think that their best offense might be just like crash the offensive glass relentlessly and dominate that, because you can just throw a ton of size on the rebounds, and shooting is probably going to be a question mark, unless like Gabe Cuffs just lights the world on fire.
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of I'm hedging my bets about officiating in the Big Ten, because I do think that the Big Ten big man issue has always been because of the way it's officiated. And if they don't change that, like Indiana's roster, honestly, is made for that. They have a lot of big men. They're a lot more athletic than I think traditional Big Ten big men, but they have a lot of them. And so they can throw a lot of bodies down low and really do what is needed to win in the Big Ten. I think a little bit more so than some of these other teams. But like you said, like this is the team that gives me the most pause when it comes to winning in March. Because if Xavier Johnson doesn't stay healthy, or if he or Trey Galloway get into foul trouble, like your next man up is Gabe Cups. And I don't know if I trust that to win more than like a game against a 13 seed if they were, even if they were seeded that high, right? I don't think they will be, but like I don't trust them to win a game in March. If one of their two guards goes out.
Yeah, for IU fans, I would almost look at this as like a bridge year and hope. I think you probably get Renew back for his junior year and hope you can keep one of Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbaka for another year, and you get to bring in Liam McNeely and probably Boogie Flan next year. Like Woodson's doing work on the recruiting trail. Maybe you bring in a couple veterans through the portal, because I think this is more of like just a foundational year to get back a little bit closer to where Indiana has like been trying to get to since I don't know, like Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo were there like a decade now, and even before that, like the plight of the Indiana fans. But I know I mentioned them as a team that I'm really high on. We'll pivot over to Ohio State. So that's a team I have them fourth in the league. I think their ceiling, like, I might be dumb for this, but I think their ceiling is like a top 10 team in the country. We've seen Chris Holtmann raise teams to that level before, and I really like the makeup of this roster. Where are you at on the Buckeyes?
I think they certainly have the highest ceiling of that group of team.
The non like, I think they have the highest
Yeah.
ceiling out of the non Michigan State Purdue teams.
Yeah, it's them or Indiana for me. I think Indiana's ceiling is high. It's just more things have to go right. Yeah, so like I don't mind that pick. Again, after Zed Key, like you're relying on a lot of freshmen stepping up. So can you really trust that to be what brings you to the promised land? I don't know. But they're that team. I don't know what to make of them because they've got quite a few newcomers, or at least two newcomers in their starting rotation. Jamison Battles obviously played in the Big Ten. Dale Bonner is really talented. It's just it's relying a lot on those three sophomores to get better. Which, like, I know I made the case that I think the sophomores at Purdue get better, and so why don't I make the same case for Ohio State? And my response is because they need to get better. Purdue still has Zach Edey, and that's my argument. Like, this is a lot of, they've got two transfers, fifth-year guys coming in, but they're not foundational pieces to this Ohio State team. The foundational pieces are Akpara, Gale, Thornton. And they need at least two of them to get to a borderline all Big Ten level, I think, to be that top 10, top 15 team in the country. But I have them sixth. I have them right behind Indiana. I think those two are the teams to me where I'm hedging bets a little bit that they don't quite hit their ceiling. And I like the floor of Illinois. I like the floor of Maryland a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, where I disagree with you is I just love this sophomore class. I think they all showed flashes at important times. Like Felix Akpara had some really nice games in the non-con and has a ton of tools as a rim protector. He gets off the floor really quickly. He's explosive, a lob threat that they're going to have. And Bruce Thornton, I mean, he had stretches of the season where he looked like one of the 2 or 3 best guards in the conference. And I think, he's maybe not a first round type of talent, but probably a second round type of talent who they get for another year. As a sophomore, good build, can hold up in a physical conference like the Big Ten. And Roddy Gale, like, I mean, I wrote the breakout candidates for the Almanac, and I had Gale as like my number 12 breakout candidate because you look at his numbers and he shot 43% from 3, which is obviously really impressive, especially as a freshman. And you might look at like, okay, 6'4" off guard shooter type. That's all he can do, but he can put the ball on the floor and he is super bouncy, very explosive. Like if you search his highlights on Twitter, one of the first ones that pop up is like a double clutch dunk in traffic against Iowa. And granted, yeah, I know Iowa doesn't really play defense like that, but still, like that kind of guy who's that explosive with that shooting stroke, I love to take a leap in year 3. And you mentioned Dale Bonner. I think that's a sneaky good ad for them, who is going to be a veteran, comes in, knows his role, has played on a national championship team, been a part of a great program in Baylor. And Jamison Battle has flown under the radar too as just a guy who's a proven double-digit scorer in the conference. The last guy I got to mention, I know you said they have some freshmen. Like I love Scotty Middleton, and I think I'm seeing there's a world by season's end where you're able to start Thornton and Gale at the 1 and the 2. You have Akpara at the 5, Battle at the 4, Zed Key off the bench, which is crazy, a dude who can get buckets down low, and then Scotty Middleton at the 3. Because he's just a pure scorer, has a really good looking shot, and Holtmann has a great track record of finding those freshmen who are sort of in that like 25 to 40 range, like a Malachi Branham. EJ Liddell was in that range. And he's been able to get the most. And Bruce Thornton was in that range as well, coming in last year. Bryce Sensabaugh, who's turned pro too. Like So I think I trust Holtman's track record as far as identifying talent that's going to be able to contribute probably more quickly than most people expect.
Yeah, I guess my biggest concern was last year there were a lot of times where it seemed like, and maybe he didn't have to, maybe that was part of the issue, but it seemed like there were a lot of instances last year where Sensabaugh seemed like he was the only guy who could do anything offensively.
Yeah, and couldn't do anything
And
defensively.
yeah, but you know, that's my concern is they don't have him this year. And so it's a chicken or the egg thing. Did they play poor offensively because it was the Sensabaugh show, or was
Right.
Sensabaugh taking over in the way he was because they were playing poor offensively? Who knows? But again, I think clear top half, clear top 6-7 team in the Big Ten.
Yeah, yeah. I would argue. I think that the offense is just gonna look a lot more smoother, more ball movement, less ISO ball without Sensabaugh in there. And I'm excited to see how that works out. Connor, do we have to talk about Wisconsin? Do we have to talk about our crockpot mediocrity benchmark?
Crockpot?
They got a bunch,
No,
of,
I like
of white dudes.
I like their roster.
They
I
got
like
Chucky
their
Hepburn.
depth.
They're going to be fine. Not spectacular.
They're that mediocre team, right?
Yeah, right. Like I don't want to watch them. And Chucky Hepburn, middle of the road point guard. I guess like Connor Esigian could have a nice little sophomore leap in store. He's impressive. I mean, I know AJ Storr actually has some athleticism and some flash. And let's see, when's the last time Wisconsin had any excitement on their team? Was it when like Sam Decker was dunking on dudes in the 2015 like Final Four run?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's all we need to say about Wisconsin. And
yeah, Tyler Wall is probably better than average at the 4.
Yeah. Shout out Tyler Wall.
And
Steven Crowell is there.
Big. Yeah.
All right,
he is a
moving
big
on.
man.
So I did want to hit on like the kind of the lower half of that jumbled middle, as I called it earlier, where you have your Iowas, Michigans, Rutgers of the world. I think those three are kind of probably a tick above Northwestern and Nebraska. Though Northwestern, they have Boo Buie, the best guard in the conference. Like, probably shouldn't completely disregard them. Of those 5 teams, Connor, your Iowa, Michigan, Rutgers, Northwestern, Nebraska, are any of those like intriguing to you? Are any of those teams like I'm looking forward to seeing if they can, perform in this manner or reach these expectations or break out of that? Like, yeah.
Intriguing's a funny word. I think if you were to ask me which 2 teams, if 2 of those teams were to make the tournament this year, which 2 would they be?
That's a good question.
I would say, and this is not an endorsement of these 2 teams, and it's not even my 8th and 9th team. It's just, I would say it's probably Iowa and Michigan.
Oh, that's exactly what I would say. Look at us on the same page. Those are my 8th and 9th team.
It's Iowa. Yeah, I mean, they probably are my 8th and 9th team now that I look at it. It's Iowa's offense being enough to overcome what is bound to be another sieve of a defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's Michigan doing what Michigan hasn't done the last couple of years, which is taking talented players and actually doing something with it, right?
Yeah.
Like, Kamwa is one that comes to mind. Like, he is a talented player who never quite reached what we thought he was going to at Tennessee, right? And granted, the way Tennessee plays, like 11-5 is pretty impressive stat line.
Yeah, that's like 17-8 on like a fast-paced team.
And Amari Burnett, again, a lot of talent, came in to college with a lot of talent, hasn't put it together.
Right.
So like, this is a team where you're asking a coach who, other than like 1.5 years, hasn't been able to put it all together, to take players who haven't been able to put it all together and put it all together. But this is a talented team. So I think it's one of those things where don't want to say tournament or bust, because I tend to think that star players from their past schools get a longer leash than most head coaches. But this is a team where if they don't make the tournament, like, that's a disappointment, given the talent level. And I don't think they do, but like, to me, they're the intriguing one. Iowa, I just don't think has the same talent, but they're going to put up 85 points a game and they're going to give up 82.
Yeah, Michigan. Yeah, I'm with you on Iowa. All I was going to say is I think wouldn't be surprising to see them have an elite top 20, maybe even higher offense again, just because Fran's done that like what feels like the last 5 years. Probably won't be able to stop anybody. I don't like that there's not a Murray twin, but at least they have a couple Sanfords. Like, that's fun. With Michigan, though, I'm a big fan of Kamwa. I think he could be one of the better players in the league. Really good athlete, really good build. Like, should immediately be like maybe the second most impactful defender. The second most defender in the league after Edey, just because of Edey's ability to alter shots at the rim. I think Burnett was someone who I loved coming out of prolific prep. I thought he was going to be a star, like you said, never put it all together, but he can still be a solid starter. Doug McDaniel could have a breakout in store. Like, that dude is lightning quick. And he's going to probably have a really high usage this year. He's probably going to be able to get a bunch of shots up. So, yeah, I would almost say, Michigan's not quite on Indiana's level as far as range of outcomes go, but they could be a pretty volatile team. Like, there's a world where they get in as an 11 seed and Juwan does what he's been doing and makes the second weekend. Like, that's he has a history of doing that. I mean, they could even be higher than that. I don't mean to knock on them if they can if they can get some help from the wing, like maybe Yusuf Kayat lives up to some of his pedigree and, is that 3-and-D type of body they need out there. And they're able to ascend even higher. But there's also a very real chance they miss the tournament and kind of have a disastrous year. And Juwan is trying to get back into the NBA ranks a year from now because his kids are gone. His kids are gone from Michigan, I should say.
Yeah, they're a team that I could easily see finishing like 6th or 7th in the Big Ten, making a run to the title game or winning the title game in the Big Ten tournament, and then like getting run by like 15 points by Youngstown State or something like that. Like, they're just the range of possibilities and the range of possibilities and the like the not knowing, the uncertainty of what's going to happen with a lot of these players for me is why I shy away from Michigan. And because they've had talent before. Like, I was high on Michigan last year, even though they were coming off a disappointing season, because like they have the talent, they have the coaching. He's done it before. That was a down year. That was a fluke. And then it was a down year again. And if it's a down year this year, like, when do we have to start talking about it being a coaching issue rather than a talent issue?
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, I think they're more interesting than Northwestern or Rutgers, even though Northwestern and Rutgers, I think, have a little bit more stable floor than Michigan does.
Totally fair. Rutgers is like, I'm slightly interested in them. I know they'll play ugly. It's not always going to be the aesthetically pleasing style, but I think Derek Simpson's a really good guard, secondary playmaker type who can make some shots. Gavin Griffiths is a top 50 kid, and as of now, I think is the highest ranked recruit highest ranked enrollee probably in Rutgers history, because I know they have Ace Bailey coming in next year, and probably have Dylan Harper as well. But Rutgers, I think, like, seems like Steve Peichel is cleaning up on the trail and is kind of had this renaissance, or it seems like players love to play for him, which makes me not want to completely rule them out, even though they lost Mulcahy, and even though they lost Cam Spencer. Like, maybe they're a sneaky tournament team. And then, I've also gassed up Nebraska this offseason as a surprise team, but even I don't know if they can get to the big dance. But I just love Keisei Tominaga and Bryce Williams. But anything you'd add on those teams?
Is going to be super fun to watch. With Rutgers, it's like watching Noah Fernandez last year at UMass was so much fun. I don't know how he does as a starting point guard in the Big Ten, given that we have a lot of really good guards in the Big Ten this year. But he could be one of those Big Ten guards that like comes out of nowhere, Rutgers might not be a tournament team, but you get like 3 or 4 games where Fernandez scores like 20 points, dishes out like 6 assists, and they beat Indiana or Illinois on the road, right? Like, well, okay, at home it's Rutgers.
Right,
so,
true. It's got to be in the rack.
But like that wouldn't surprise me. But again, they don't have shooting. I think sleepers is high on them for next year, and I think that's probably the right attitude to have for Rutgers.
That could be a stupid good team next year. Oh my gosh, with Derek Simpson, Harper, Bailey, and Gavin Griffiths back, that's a really good team right there. That's like a top 3 Big Ten team.
Yeah, I mean, this is a team that's really experienced. It's like really experienced or not experienced at all. I think they're going to be a team that you don't want to play if you're a bubble team in the Big Ten.
Oh,
because they're going to be seen as a bad loss if you lose, but they can beat any team, I think, not named Michigan State and Purdue.
And even like going to Rutgers, like we've seen Purdue lose there before when they have a better team. So, anything you would want to say about either Penn State or Minnesota before we go to our bold predictions?
Not Penn State or not Minnesota. I think Penn State is going to be interesting because I think they're a team that if they can put it together, if Mike Rhodes can get everything out of these players, they're a team that is going to have a losing record on the season. I truly believe that. They're going to be painful to watch in November, December. But there's a chance that they're a top 8 to 10 team in the Big Ten through the month of February, and not like a non-zero chance. And so they're a team like Rutgers, which is like they are truly a trap game, especially like I think Rutgers is going to be pretty mediocre throughout the course of the season, but I think Penn State is that team that's going to head into the Big Ten with, I haven't looked at their schedule, but like 5-6 record, 5-7 record, or whatever it's going to be, and you're looking at them like, oh, they suck, and then you get them, but you get them between a game between Michigan State and Purdue, or between Illinois and Purdue and stuff like that, where you can't really overlook them because they still have the talent,
right?
But you can't really focus entirely on them because you've still got Purdue on the back end of that 3-game stretch. So it's going to be interesting. They're a team I'm definitely watching, not only because of just the fact their top 7 or top 8 are all going to be newcomers, but also because, how is Mike Rhodes going to do in year 1 with all newcomers while it might not be the best team in the best conference in the country, it's probably second toughest in the country behind the Big 12. So it'll be fun. That's it. It'll be fun.
All right. On that, let's close with some bold predictions. And I'm going to get us started. And it ties into that team I've been gassing up, the Ohio State Buckeyes. I think this is the team that gets Chris Holtmann over the hump. I have them as a top 4 team. And then I think when they get to the NCAA tournament, they get to the second weekend, and not just the second weekend, they make the Elite 8. And Chris Holtmann finally gets to put it together for a March run after having some great seasons at Gardner-Webb, after having great seasons at Butler, and a couple great seasons at Ohio State that have just ended unceremoniously thanks to guys like Max Asmus and the Sean Paul jinx. But how about you, Connor? Where are you at with a bold prediction?
I think I'm going to say this. I think that one of these big men for Michigan State is all Big Ten by the end of the year.
I like that. Anyone in particular you're leaning toward?
If I were to pick one right now, I think we see Xavier Booker break out in a big way in the second half of the season. But I would not rule out. Actually, that would be it. I think it's probably Xavier Booker, but I wouldn't rule out like a Malik Hall either. Getting a little bit more of a scoring role in this offense, and maybe stretching the floor a little bit more a little bit more effectively than he did last year. But if Xavier Booker lives up to the billing, it's not a stretch to call him the second or third best big man in the conference. So
no problems for me with those takes. I like it. I think, as we've said, the top of the league, those top two are going to be really fun to watch and see if Purdue can find a little bit of redemption and see if Izzo shows that, he hasn't lost his fastball. The rest of the league will be fascinating to see how it unfolds too, at least those next 4 to 6 teams. So that's all we have for this week. Stay tuned for the Heat Check Hangout podcast feed to see all the previews of every major conference, top 6 leagues coming out before the season starts. Less than 3 weeks. Looking forward to it, man. And we'll be here all season covering it for you. So I'm your host, Riley Davis. With Connor Hope, we're out of here.
Basketball, college. Basketball, college. Oh, is that time already? Whoa, basketball, college. Basketball, college. Basketball, college.